So today again, we are going to discuss some of the very common and popular interview questions on JavaScript. I will tell you the basic concepts behind those small, little, tricky questions. So without wasting time, let's go and jump into those questions. You can watch my previous videos also. There also, I have covered many important interview tricky questions, which are very tricky, need your very small understanding to find out the answers. So yeah, let me quickly go to VS Code and then see how the solution works. So we have top 15 here. Question number 1. Okay, so now you see, guys, like I have this question1.js wherein what I'm doing is console.log and then I'm printing x, and then line number 2 is where x equal to 5. So what is the output of this, right? So, uh, okay, let me explain first. So, variable declarations using var, okay, they are hosted at to the top. So, there is something which is called hosting in JavaScript. So, whenever you declare something with var, it hosted it to the top, okay, but their values are not. So, x will be hosted to the top, but the values are not. So, x is declared at the top, okay, and then initialized at line number 2. So this will, when you run this particular question code, what will happen that your var, okay, whatever you declare with var x will be hosted to the top, and then because you are defining the value for that is at line number 2, so line number 1 will always print undefined. Okay, so let me do this. You see, undefined. Why undefined? Because this always will be converted into two steps. One is called hosting, so where it will take this x to the top and where it is only declare this, and then line number 2, which is after console.log, will define it. But line number 1 will always get the declaration, and declaration is always going to be undefined because we are not defining the value. Okay, so let's go to question number 2. This is time we are using let. Okay, so let, um, this question might be tricky because you are trying to compare this question exactly the same way as we did in question number 1, where hosting was the concept. But over here, you see, um, we are using let, right? So variables let and const, whenever you declare anything with let or const, they are hosted. They are hosted again the same way as it was hosted for var x. But they are hosted but are in a temporal dead zone until their declaration is executed. So what does it mean? Meaning that accessing y before initialization, that will cause an error, right? Because this is called temporal dead zone for something wherein you're using let and const to declare. Okay, so automatically the JavaScript runtime environment, it will host these things and put them into the temporal dead zone until what time? Until their declaration is executed. So that's how it works. And if I run this q2.js, so you see, it is called can't access y before initialization. So that is the meaning. What does it mean? Like can't access y before initialization, because it just got confused. It is in temporal dead zone. So always remember, you might always think, okay, this is let and this is more or less similar to question number 1. So over here it was undefined, so it will be undefined here as well. No, not like that. Var is exactly working in a different way than let and const, right? Let and const are hosted, and if you're playing around with the execution, then they go into the temporal dead zone until their declaration is executed. All right, so till y, line number 1, it was in temporal dead zone. Y was not even declared, so that's why it says reference errors. Okay, question number 3 is, this is a very tricky question, right? I think it is very important to tell you, like, hey, what we are doing? We are saying console.log type of foo. Foo is what? We need to understand what is foo. Foo, okay, function foo, and then this particular thing looks like me a function, but hey, what's I'm doing? I'm just putting some more, brackets right there, and then also right like these brackets over here. So I have my beautiful function. I put those more brackets. So what does it changing? So foo is a named function expression, right? Because you're giving it to name, that's foo. And it is not accessible outside its own scope. Why? Because you see here, you use these brackets. So what these brackets will do, they will create the function foo in its own scope, and then these two brackets will immediate execute this function also. So whenever you do foo, so what will happen? It will not only you know um, call this function, but also at the same time it will print everything which is inside. So foo function will be called here, and because it is immediately invoked function, right, so this hello will be printed for sure. But type of hello, what it will be, it will returns type of, not hello, type of foo. So foo returns undefined. So this will be called irrespective of line 4. Okay, let me come again and explain you one more time. So this block which I selected right here, what do you think? When you run the program, this block will always be executed, and that is why it is called immediate invocation. So whenever you are declaring a function and you want to execute it immediately, you have two ways, right? What is the first way? Let's remove this. Let's remove this. Let's remove this. And then you can just say foo, and then you can run the function. This is one way. But let's say if you want to immediately execute it function the moment you are declaring it, so what you can do? You can just do like this. This function will be executed or invoked immediately moment it is declared. So hello will be printed because of that. And then type of foo. Foo, what is the type of foo? See, foo is defined now when you use these brackets. It has its own scope which is not accessible outside. So foo is named function expression and is not accessible outside its own scope. That is why type of foo returns undefined. So this is also a very important question. So let me run it. Node q3.js, and you see hello and undefined. So I think this is clear. Now let's go to question number 4. All right. Question number 4. What is this? Very simple. Most of the time people get confused. So what happens? So always remember there is something called coercion, and that coercion is where any type that you define, for example, false, these will be converted to 0. So over here, what will be the output? 0 double equals, this will be 0, and this 3 equals. This checks strict equality without type corrections. So what does it mean? It will try to check if this value over here is exactly equal to this value. So this is where type Gaussian works, but this three ternary, three equals, they are checking the strict equality without type. So this is not going to be 0 in this case. So this will be false and this will be true. Let me run this. Node q4.js. See, true and false. Let me go to question number 5. Okay, now we have an object which is a comma 1. Then console.log object.a and plus object and then a inside this array. Okay, so dot notation, I think this is very good, and you know what is dot notation. So object dot a is always 1. Okay, line number 2, this piece is always 1. Then what we are doing, we are saying object and then a as a key. So what we are doing here, so 1, and then this is also the same way. I mean, people who are not aware, but you can also try to find out the value of an object when you pass this as a key. So key like this is always going to work. So 1 plus 1 is equals to 2. So node, so it's 2. All right. Question number 6. Okay. Outer is something which we are talking about, right? So now when we talk about outer and functions like this, when we have a function inside function, the concept which comes in, which is called closure. All right. Closures. So function outer, then we have let count equal to 0 and return function inner count plus plus console.log count, and then over here we are doing this. So what? Each call to fn increments the same count. Why? Why? Because inner forms a closure over outer scope. So inner this function, it forms a closure over the outer scope. So what will happen each time you call fn? So for example, you call fn here, then it called outer, and then count equal to 0, then count will become 1, uh, and then 1 will be printed, and then again you count fn, and then again you think that you go and then count will be equal to 0, and then again it will be 1. So you are expecting an output of 1 comma 1, but this is not true. Why? Because each call, when you make fn increments the same count, okay, each call to fn increments the same count, because inner forms a closure over outer scope. So how exactly that works? So let me explain you with in a very simple, way, what is closure first. Uh so so closure is something wherein, when we talk about uh, any function which is, let's say you're defining an outer function, right? So the function outer is defined, and when called, a local variable count is initialized to 0, and then a new function inner is returned. So inner has access to the count variable through closure, okay, as inner is defined inside outer and can access its variable even after outer has returned. So what is it? This is very important, that inner has access to the count variable through closure, as inner is defined inside outer and can access its variable even after the outer has returned. So this is why it will access, it has access to the count variable. So yeah, so calling outer, so for example fn, when you say fn is equals to outer, and then outer function is executed, and then outer function will do all its thing, like it holds inner function. So the inner function is returned and assigned variable fn at this point, and then fn holds a reference to inner function, and the count variable is preserved in memory due to closure. So that is why, because the count variable which is initialized to 0 in the beginning is preserved in memory due to closure. So closure is going to, work behind the scene here, and it is very important to understand closures, right? It is a very very important topic. So closures, they work because of the lexical scoping. So a closure is a function that has access to its own scope, the scope of the outer function, and global scope even after the outer function has finished. So let's say when you run fn and then outer, so even after this outer function is finished its execution, it has um, the access to its own scope and the scope of the outer function. So everything it will always, remember. It allows a function to remember and access variable from its outer scope. So over here inner will always remember and and has access to the variable which is declared defined in its outer scope, even when the function is executed outside of that scope. That is closure. Okay, so closure is formed when an inner function is defined inside an outer function. The inner function retains access to the outer function variables even after the outer function is returned. So over here, when you call first time, outer function is returned, but inner function will always retain access to the outer function's variable even after this function is returned. Okay, and how this closure concepts works in, so closure works with a basic concept which is called lexical scoping. So when a function is declared, it captures references to all variable in its outer lexical environment. So over here, when you declare this function inner count plus plus, so it will try to capture all the references, okay, in its outer lexical environment. So if the inner function is returned and passed as a value, or right here, like line number 3, it retains these references, right, and allowing it to access variables even after. So you are returning it, so it will always retain the values which are here. So even after you this outer function return, because you are returning here this function, um, then it will retain, allowing it to access variables even after the outer function execution context is destroyed. Okay, so that's how the variable always going to play the role. So let me explain one more time. Line number 8, outer is called and the inner is returned. All right, so this is the variable in the outer function, and then this is the inner function. So this will print first what, like count is 1. Okay, and then again this function will have the references, it will retain the values, so it will increase the count of the previous iteration, which was 1 and then 2. So it will print 2, 1 first and then 2. So let me run this node q6.js. So 1 and 2. So that's how it works. Question number 6, I think it's clear. This is a very good concept wherein we talk about closures and what is the importance of closures and all this, right? So this is very important to know how closure work. So closure works um, in its own, I would say, the boundary wherever you define it. So when you need to retain state across different function calls, a closure is the answer. When you want to create private variables or encapsulate data, closure is the answer. When building a high order functions or event handlers, closure is a function, right? But we have to be very, very careful because sometimes closure can lead to memory leaks if references are not held, are held unnecessarily, right? So you need to be very, very careful when you can, have those bugs also into the closure. So yeah, so that's pretty much all. Question number 6. Let's go to question number 7. Okay, question number 7. So this question is very popular, and sometimes, most of the times, I would say this is asked. We have console.log line number 1, which is start. Line number 3, console.log end. So I think it looks very simple. Start, timeout, end, right? No, it will not work like this. Why? There is a concept called event loop. Okay, so event loop. What is event loop? Now you need to understand what is how this function is going to be executed. So there is a concept called event loop. And what is this event loop? Let me explain you very in a very simplistic way this event loop. So event loop actually is a concept in Java script wherein we talk that about a queue, right? Which is called event queue. So what will happen every time, whenever we run something in our JavaScript program. So the event loop is a mechanism in JavaScript that handles execution of synchronous code. So meaning um, execution of synchronous code and also asynchronous tasks such as callback, promises, and events. So it ensures JavaScript remains non-blocking, right? Despite being single-threaded. So this event loop concept, it was, it is an important concept because JavaScript is a single-threaded. So when it is a single-threaded, how you can utilize it in a better way. So then they have something called event loop, which always makes sure that all the operations there remains non-blocking despite being single-threaded architecture of JavaScript, meaning call stacks, task queue, micro task queue. I will cover another topic, another video where we'll talk about more um, basic, very core concepts of JavaScript. We'll discuss about call stack, task queue, micro task, and all that. But for now, let's focus on this event loop. So event loop, important thing is called call stack. The call stack keeps track of function calls. When a function is called, it is pushed into the stack. Once its execution finishes, it pops out of the stack. Then we have something called web API. Functions like set timeout, they are handled by the browser Node.js runtime environment in separate thread. So the set timeout function sends the callback to the task queue after the specified delay. Then we have something called task queue. The task queue stores asynchronous callbacks like set timeout for the event loop to process when the call stack is empty. So whenever the call stack which has the real thing to be executed, when it is empty, it picks something from the task queue, okay, and then run it. So meaning this line, they are not going to run in sequential way, okay. Why? Because this set timeout, as I said, this functions is handled by the browser Node.js in separate thread. So the set timeout function, it will send out the callback to the task queue. So this line number 2, when it gets executed, it send a callback to the task queue, and after a certain delay, whatever you provide here, the task queue will keep on waiting. Hey, the call stack is empty or not? Okay, if it is empty, let's execute this for the event loop. So there is also something called micro task queue, okay, promises and process dot next ticks callbacks are placed in the microtask queue, which has the higher priority, and then it runs, right? So now again, in this very simplistic, basic understanding of event loop, continuously monitors the call stack and queues. If the call stack is empty, it processes tasks from the micro task queue first, right? Because this is which where the higher priority actions are always there, and then task queues, like task queue, as I said, it contains set timeout, set interval. So what is the output? Let's go to the question. Because this is maintained in a separate queue, when you run this, so start, timeout, and end, for sure this will never ever be the output, because this will be out of sequence. The answer what I'm expecting here would be not in this order. So it would be start, end, and timeout. Timeout could be last, right? So let me check node q7.js. So you see start, end, timeout. Timeout is coming in the node, in the last. Why so? As I said again, discussing this example. So this particular thing, event loop, okay, it continuously monitors something called call stack and queues. All right. So if the call stack is empty, it processes task from the micro task queue first. Micro task queue is one type of queue which has priority actions, and then task queue. So task queue, the queue which is having not priority action. So there in that task queue, set timeout, set interval will all be stored, and then it will run it. So that's why for sure it will not run immediately. Question number 8. Question number 8 is where we are talking about an object, and there in that object, what we see is we are using a equal to 10, comma b equal to 20, and then equal to, and then a comma colon 5. What we are doing? We are kind of destructuring with the default values. So whenever you are doing something like this, a is equal to 10 in an object, so what you are doing? You are destructuring with default values. So a is taken from the object, right? And then overriding the default, while B uses its default value as it is not in the object, correct? So what is the output here? So A will be overridden, so it will be 5, right? Because you see A is taken from the object, default value was 10, and then it was overridden by 5, so it will be 5. What is B? So B will always use its default value, so it will be 20. So if I run node q7.js, so you see, sorry, q8.js, 5 and 20. Let's go to question number 9. All right. Question number 9. What is this? Const object, x10, get x. All right. So this particular function is called an arrow function inside this get x. Get x is nothing but is an arrow function. So arrow function do not have their own this. Remember the word. Arrow functions do not have their own this. This is a concept that you need to learn and remember. Whenever you have an arrow function, they do not have their own this, THIS. They inherit it from the surrounding scope, global in this case. Why? Because you see here, object, it's cleared. Then we have one key, which is x comma 10. Then we have get x as a method. And then we are doing this dot x. So what we are expecting? We are expecting that this should have its own, arrow function should have its own scope. And then object dot get x, it should print value 10 because this is representing this object, and then x is representing the value 10. No, it won't work like this. Why? Because arrow function over here do not have their own this. They inherit it from the surrounding scope. Okay. So yeah. So the answer that you want is something which will never ever work here because of the scoping. Okay. And this operator for arrow functions uh, will never ever be the current object scope. So yeah, like this. uh so let me quickly ask you how, let's say you have to make this problem, this solution print 10, what you will do. Okay, so you need to understand, if you have to uh, do this so that it will print 10, then what you have to do. So instead of arrow function, you can use regular function. So what you can do, so for example, if I just first let me run this node q9.js, you see undefined, right? And now let me quickly just remove this and make it a normal function without arrow. So I will do function. All right. And now if I run this, it's 10. It's working. Why? Okay. Because now you are not using arrow function. Okay. Question number 10. So question number 10 is we have an array, and then in that array we have 1, 2, 3, 3 elements. All right. Then we have new array. We are doing map. And then what we are doing, just multiplying every single number by 2. So we are expecting an answer like line number 3, we are expecting an answer like 2, 4, 6. And then line number 4, we are expecting an answer is like, okay, line number 1, we are expecting an answer 1, 2, 3. And line number 4, we are expecting an answer like 2, 4, 6. Yes. So yes, that is right. So map methods creates a new array without mutating the original array. So over here, this will not mutate the original array, right? So you must need to understand uh, how to mutate original array. This is a concept, right? So map is, as I said, it will never mutate. It will never mutate the original array. So if you want to mutate it, you can use what? For each. So for example, you can do array dot for each, and then you can just do the mutation. And then you can also do something like array is equal to array dot map, like a new array will be created. So yeah, there are different ways, but map will never ever mutate the original array. So this is always very important. So if I run this, as I said, so it will be question number 10. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 6. Question number 11. Again, we have a nums array, and then we are using delete operator. So delete removes the value but does not change the array length. Remember, whenever you perform any delete on an array, it just removes the value, not change the array object. The index becomes empty over here. So if I run this node uh, q11.js, so you see the output 1 and then empty 3 comma 3. So what it does, it just removes the array uh, value and then created an empty block. So that is always important. So sometimes we get confused. People say line number 4, it will be 2 instead of 3. But as I said, delete will never change the length. It will only remove the values. All right. So now question number 12. Okay, question number 12 is a very great concept of promises. Okay, we must we know we should know what is promise and what how this await and all that work. So over here we have an async function, and that's why we are calling using an await inside. Await function test console.log1, await promise.resolve console.log2. And then outside this, we first call test function, and then we call console.log3. So what is the expectation? So line number 6, as per line number 6, when you see this, we think okay 1, 2, and then after that we are printing line number 7. So 7, 1, 2, and 3. This should be the output, isn't it? Yes, you are thinking in a wrong way. This is not, because there is a trick. Await, what it do? It pauses the execution of test, okay, but allows the main thread to continue 3 logs before 2. Meaning, moment line number 3 comes, it pauses, but main thread will always continue. So 1, 3, 2 would be the output, not 1, 2, 3. Okay, so await pauses. Await pauses the execution, right? Await pauses how much time? If you ask this, so await pauses the execution for like, see, await can always be used inside async, right? So when await is used, it pauses the execution of async function until the promise is settled. So whatever you promise you have, until it is settled, it will always, wait for that particular. But if you want to, let's say, go for a fixed amount of time, you can have your set timeout function, and then you can do that. Okay, let's go to question number 13. So what is question number 13? We have a function which is called sum, and then we see three dots. What is this three dot concept? This three dot concept is called rest parameters. Okay. So we have function three dots arguments, and then we call this method from line number 4 console.log sum. We are passing 1 2 3 4. So this dot 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 arg syntax collect all argument into an array, allowing them to be reduced to a sum. So it can collect as many arguments you want. So let's say you have a requirement wherein you don't know how many argument a function can be passed, can use. So you can just define dot 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 arguments. If you know the fixed type, you can do that. You can imply some type also there. So this will print the sum of all numbers, which is 1 2 3 and 4. So 4 plus 3 7 plus 2 9 plus 1 10. So node q13.js, it's 10. Right. Question number 14. Question number 14 is very important concept where you might be knowing, like name equal to guest in an argument which is called greet. This is called default parameters. Remember, if you pass the value of name, it will take that. If you don't pass, it will print same as is guest. So line number 4 will print hello John. Line number 5 will print guest hello guest. Okay. So node q14.js. Hello John, hello guest. Question number 15. Okay, question number 15. It's called very important topic in JavaScript. Okay, what is that topic? So the topic is called prototype inheritance. We have a function person name, this dot name equal to name, then person dot prototype dot say name is equal to function, and then we are creating an object const person equal to new personalize person dot say name. Okay. So when we say person dot say name, we are calling a function which is say name defined in the prototype of person object, where we are passing alias. So this is a concept. I think everyone know the output which will be alias. So you can just use any object dot prototype and define whatever you need there. All right. So if I run this q15.js, so it's alias. Thank you very much. I see you in other videos.